Hello fellow cinephiles, welcome back. So today I've decided to review Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning as one completed film. It does differ once we get into the second film, as due to the fact that Dead Reckoning didn't do as well as they really wanted it to. It pivoted and took the story in a different direction, which is something I just recently heard Christopher McQuarrie talk about in the making of both of these films. So I thought, because it's one completed story, might as well do them together. And then sort of talk about aspects I liked of each, how the stories connect, and a variety of other things that unfold in these particular films. We'll start with Dead Reckoning. I was a big fan of Chris McQuarrie's entries into this particular series with Rogue Nation and Fallout. Fallout, I think, being maybe the best in the whole series. And when they announced they're doing another one and another one after, I was a bit skeptical, just because I really enjoyed Fallout and I thought that was a really good conclusion of everything, and it could be a way to end the series in a great way. But as it unfolded and the story they wanted to tell and what they were going to do with this film, I became really excited and really looking forward to what they were going to do. And I must admit, when I first saw this film, I liked it, but I didn't love it as much as a previous movie, and I didn't feel the connection to it. It really took a second viewing of this film for me to really invest myself into it and really understand what they were doing in the story they were telling. And I really was drawn into this. And then watching this again not long ago, for the lead up to the new film, I've just got a real love and appreciation for this movie, and I would put it up to just underneath Fallout, or as good as Fallout, in its choices made, what they do with particular characters, the introduction of new characters, and this introduction of this new villain, the AI, which was a huge departure from the other sort of movies that they'd done, where the villain was usually a villain of the week, so to speak. Some of them were really great, like Philip Seymour Hoffman in the third film. But I just mean it in that it was sort of just a normal villain, where this was trying something really different. And I take my hat off to Christopher McQuarrie and Tom Cruise for crafting the idea of this particular villain for this series, and where they could really take this idea. There's a lot to like here about this film. Like I mentioned, after watching Fallout, I really didn't know how much bigger they could really go, where they could go with the story. And they really surprised me, and I really loved that. I really loved they're able to play with people's expectations and take things bigger and larger than they'd done before, and I thought that was really great. But it wasn't that they went bigger, it was just they shifted direction, and they took it in a different direction that they had done in the previous movie. And like many people have mentioned, like Christopher McQuarrie was the first director that did multiple films, multiple Mission Impossible films. The previous movies were all different directors and different stories, and Ethan was different in each one of them. Where this feels like it gets back to the essence of what was created in the first film and Rogue Nation and the Fallout and the films that followed. In essence, it kind of returned to what the original film was doing, with a simple story that was kind of complex in parts. It had big set pieces and things going on, and really colourful and interesting characters. And it was about, once again, it's about Ethan working out what needs to be done and working with his team to accomplish it. I think where the story differed from the previous films is this film was really about Ethan, about how the villain, the AI, could predict everything that he was going to do, and he didn't know what to do or what direction to take things. And he wanted everybody to survive, and he wanted to control the situations. But when things start to unfold in a way he can't control, he doesn't really know what to do at first. This has many great set pieces. Like one of the opening scenes where Ethan goes to find Ilsa, who's in the desert, and there's these paid assassins after her. That whole sequence is fantastically done. There's no real dialogue except for a couple of words. And it's just really engaging sequence that takes place in this sandstorm in the desert. It's just really wonderfully done. And also when Ethan goes in disguise into the meeting with all the heads of Americans, like CIA and FBI and all that sort of stuff, and Kittredge, and how he gasses that and has that conversation with Kittredge is a really great scene. And this sequence sets up a lot in this movie as well. Two things: it sets up that Angela Bassett's character may be like the president, because there's a picture of her on the wall. And also, like, there's a moment where Kittredge talks to Ethan and says, no matter what you do, what decisions you make, this is going to cost you dearly. And just in the background on the screen, out of focus, is a picture of Ilsa. Like, it sets up as a foreshadowing of her death. So there's sequences throughout that are great. I really like the airport sequence. I like that things don't go according to plan in that. And Ethan thinks the only way to accomplish that is to push everybody away and keep them safe, and he takes the responsibility of it, and he has to accomplish it, so he thinks by himself. He has to track down Grace, who Hayley Atwell's a great introduction, was a great addition to this series, and I really liked her character, Grace. To begin with, she was a bit annoying, but you start to see why she's doing it, and you understand her a lot more. And it's really about Ethan trying to tell her, to try and get her to understand what's going on, and to try and pull everything together. And ultimately he can't, and that's when his team resurfaces and comes to help him. He doesn't want them to, but they can't help it. They're there to help him. And this is where Ilsa also reappears. It has some really wonderful moments. It really looks at Ilsa and Ethan's relationship. There's clearly a epic love story in this whole series. It started with the previous 2 films and leads into this. And they have this really sweet moment where they're standing on the balcony. I think they're in Venice. And she says, "This is my first time in Venice, and this is mine too." And they sort of hug each other in a loving look. It really is a beautiful moment, but it's also foreshadowing sadness that's going to come as Ethan returns to that spot by himself, and the impact of what has transpired for him and the others is no clearer than in this particular moment. And like I mentioned, introduction of new characters, so Hayley Atwell, Clément Jeff. She's a great introduction as Paris. She's really cool in it, and it's kind of interesting. Like, I'd only really known her playing Mantis in the Marvel universe, but this was kind of like something different for her, where she was kind of a villain and action star, and she's really great in it, and so far removed from the character she plays in Guardians of the Galaxy. It was just cool to see her, and her playing a villain was great, and she has some really cool moments. And there's a costume I really love where she's in white makeup, and it's sort of like a pirate outfit. That's really cool as well. But she adds a lot to the film, and she serves a bigger purpose in the next movie, and I like the direction that they take her particular character. And there's a variety of other actors that appear and do a really great job as well. I think once again, Macquarie and Cruise really upped the ante with the action in this film and the stunts. There's a motorbike scene where Cruise takes off on this ramp and goes off the end and flies down, parachuting down to heading towards a train. This sequence is really well done. The only thing that lets it down in the movie is because they had to take that out and make it digital. It doesn't look perfect, but still has the same impact on what he's doing in that sequence. There's a car chase scene. There's a little tiny car, little yellow car that Cruise has to drive, that Ethan has to drive, being handcuffed to Grace, and the way they do that is really great as well, and Tom's fantastic in that particular sequence. Train sequence where they're fighting on the roof, that's really well done. That is visual effects, but it is very practical than actually doing. There is a fight scene that takes place on a small bridge in Venice, and at first it's between Gabriel and Grace, and Gabriel in a scene previous is told Ethan either Grace or Ilsa is going to die, and we think it's going to be Grace because they're having this knife fight, and Ilsa's getting away, but then she hears things aren't going right, and she sort of thinks, what would Ethan do? And she returns, and it's this great sequence between Gabriel and her having this sword fight. It's so great. It's so well orchestrated and interesting. There's no dialogue, and it's just this sort of back and forth. And ultimately, the tragedy that all fans of this character feel is she's ultimately killed by Gabriel. Part of us really believed and hoped she would return, that it was all fake. But I think what this film was really going for was the idea that there is a lot at stake. Anyone can die, and if they die, they stay dead. And that's ultimately what the film's getting at, the push for Ethan to continue even though he's lost her. Choices that are made. This film and the next film are really about choices that are made. The choice to become part of that group, to become part of the IMF, and what led each of the characters to that particular decision, and how Ilsa joins Ethan, and how there is a connection there between these two that are very similar. They are each other's equal in a lot of ways. For them to kill off that character like they did has such an impact on the audience and the story itself, and there's an importance to it. And also the fact that we believe Ilsa's dead earlier in the movie, so they can't do it twice. And all, like I mentioned, it ups the ante, it ups the stakes of what's going on. That anyone could die. No one knows what's going to transpire, what happened. The only thing that really knows what's going to happen is the AI. And it's about them trying to outsmart that. As I mentioned earlier, this film and the next one's really about the Ethan character. And you might say, well, he's in all of them. Yes, he is. And he serves a purpose, and there is things that he loses. In the first one, he loses his whole team, and he has to work out what to do. And there's certain things that cost him throughout the series. But this one's really about him, the choices he made in his past. We sort of get a little backstory to him. He's pushing the story forward, and it also revolves around not only the AI, but Gabriel and the past that Gabriel has with Ethan, and the impact that that has on the ultimate story and the characters themselves. It really says a lot about who he is and the person he is, and that's sort of the direction that the film's going in, and it sort of continues on into the next. There's another fight sequence I really like where I mentioned Pom was dressed in a pirate outfit, and it takes place in this close quarters little area where it's Ethan and her and another guy, and he has to fight the two of them at once. And just how the space itself lends to this fight sequence, how it's contained and controlled, and there's certain things they can't do, and it just restricts a lot of things, but in a really great way. I really love this sequence. It was really well done and really captivating. Discussion I had with a friend of mine, I really see Ethan as sort of like a superhero in a lot of ways. No, he doesn't have abilities, but he has to make the tough decisions no one else will. And he has to take on the mantle of being the hero. And it costs him something. Like all superhero movies, all superhero stories, the origin stories, and how they become the hero, there's always a cost there. There's always choices being made, and there's loss of friends, loss of loved ones. But it's about how that affects the hero, and how the hero harnesses that and stands up tall and becomes the superhero he needs to become, or they need to become. Like even Superman is a great example of that. You know, like he loses his surrogate father, Jonathan Kent. Before that, he lost his parents on Krypton. Like there's all of these things that shape him into what he becomes, and Ethan's exactly the same. And we start to see glimpses of it in Fallout, but it's really in this film where you really start to see that, how it does ultimately cost him. Kittredge was right, it costs him the love of his life, and it costs him so much more as the film unfolds. And it's about people doubting him, but he still has to do what he has to do, and he literally has to save the world in a lot of ways. And as we go into the next film, it's like that end of The Dark Knight where they say Batman is a hero, but he has to be the villain for now. He has to be seen that way. And that's kind of what they do with Ethan. To quote the film, he lives in the shadows. He has to be seen as the villain for the better of the world. And that's kind of exactly what Ethan has to do. And the villain is so strong and powerful and knows things that the hero doesn't. And he kind of, if you look at the Superman analogy, he's kind of like Brainiac, because it's this highly intelligent artificial life force that is really causing a lot of issues and distracting things and manipulating the world. And that's the other thing I kind of really like about the idea of the AI. It addresses fears that people have of the AI, of taking over, of miscommunication and misinformation, and how it's sort of convincing us of things that aren't completely real. And that's kind of what the film is, the essence of the film. Convincing people that the decisions will shape things when they won't, and how they have to outsmart this thing that's in front of them so they don't succumb to what its ultimate plan is. This really does set up an interesting story, and it does set up a very interesting sequel idea. And like I mentioned, this film didn't do as well as they really wanted it to, so they sort of shift focus, and then we get into Final Reckoning, which is why they changed the name, and it wasn't Dead Reckoning Part 2. And the way they sort of shift that, and I'll get into that in a moment. But overall, this film was really entertaining, well done, up the ante. The villain was really great, and it just sort of really reiterated certain things about Ethan and who he is, and the things that he does and the choices he has to make. The dynamic between star Tom Cruise and director Kristen McQuarrie collaboration is no more evident than it is here. They're ultimately a team that brings the best out of each other, and they'll continue to work together. And you can really see there's a bond and a love between them in what Cruise does and how McQuarrie is involved in that, and the way the stories that McQuarrie writes and directs, and how he sort of brings these crazy ideas of stunts to life with the aid of Tom Cruise and his years of experience as a stuntman. It just goes to show when a team works, they really work well together. So there was a number of years in between this film and the next film, and I think McQuarrie, there was about 7 years from the filming this first part into the second part, and overall, and the reshoots and the 2 strikes that they had, and COVID, and a lot of other things that transpired for the particular production of these films. But they shot these films back to back, and they were larger than life. There was a lot to consider, a lot to control, and you got to give credit to McQuarrie for holding it all together, keeping it together, so it didn't fall apart, and so they could conclude this story that they began years previous. So the journey for Final Reckoning has been a long one. We've been waiting for it for a long time, and it edged closer and closer, and the closer it got, the more excited I got, the more I revisited the previous movies and the Mission Impossible films, and how I really felt this was going to conclude everything, because there was stuff in the trailer that tied together from the first film and the third film and a variety of other things throughout it. So I just felt like they were going in the right direction with a complete conclusion to what they crafted in the previous movie, and also a conclusion to the whole series itself. Once again, they upped the ante. Some of the sequences in this are extraordinary. There's a submarine sequence. There's no dialogue in. It's just Ethan in a submarine under the water and navigating through it to retrieve something in particular. And just the stuff that happens to him and keeps happening, the intensity that happens in this scene, how long the scene goes on for, how long Cruise had to be in that particular suit he's in, and the certain things that he had to do. Just extraordinary. This is an example of something that I've started to see more and more when it comes to Christopher McQuarrie. Is he really, his dialogue's great and his stories are really wonderful, and he has great characters that aren't wasted and serve a purpose of sorts. But it's really in these silent moments where he shines. It's really a lot of action sequences that happen in his movies, even back to Jack Reacher, is all through silences, whether it's car chases, submarine sequences, fight sequences. It's all in the silence, and the silence says so much. And the actors and the characters convey so much without saying anything. I think it's definitely one of McQuarrie's strengths, and he does it so well. And I heard in a recent interview that he was talking about the next collaboration between him and Tom Cruise, Broadsword, that it was a film that he wanted to make for a while, and also Cruise's character only has less than 500 words in the whole film. He's very stoic, so it'll be very different for their collaboration. And as he mentioned, everything spoken in these Mission Impossible films is exposition, whether it's about the mission they're going on, whether it's the past of particular characters. Where Luther was telling Ilsa about Ethan's previous wife that they've had to put in hiding, Julia, played by Michelle Monaghan, and how the only other person he truly cares about is Ilsa, and just the sort of sequences in that. So it's all exposition. So everything that's spoken is either about characters or the situation that they find themselves in, or the story themselves. And I never really thought about that. But if you think about these movies, that's kind of what it is. The real standout aspect to these particular movies, besides great action sequences, is character. And it's about how these characters interact with each other, and how the characters really have an important part in the story and moving it forward. And the action is just part of that. And if you can tell a story with just action, then that's such a fascinating way to do it, and McQuarrie is definitely the master at that. Another sequence in this film that really stands out is the biplane sequence at the end. So these are the 2 really big set pieces. And the biplane sequence is fantastic. For those who've seen bits and pieces of it online, you'll definitely get a kick out of it when you do watch it. And it's so well done and so realistic, and it proves Cruise has no fear whatsoever. It is a little goofy in parts, particularly what they do with one particular character, but it is a really great sequence. There's so many things in this film where there's 2 things going on at once. So you've got Ethan, who's doing what he has to do, and he knows the plan and what's going for after his interaction with the AI in the mask. and he goes in the direction he has to, and he just gives information to his team, and the team have to go off and do their own thing, so it splits the teams up. And I thought that was interesting because they hadn't really done that. Usually the team together always doing this, but this was their way of sort of splitting them apart and showing that they both serve some sort of purpose in this particular story. And I really love the evolution of Benji from the third one to this, and what he's allowed to do and who he becomes by the end of the film. It's just really wonderful, and I think Simon Pegg's fantastic in this movie. He's added a lot of humour and levity and a really interesting character in that of Benji. There's many other sequences in the film to enjoy as well, but those two are the main particular aspects to the movie and the biggest action sequences in the film. There'd been a lot of talk in regards to whether this was going to be the final film, whether they're going to continue on doing more, or if this was going to be the final hurrah. To me, it's the final film. I couldn't see them making another one. I wouldn't even know what direction they would go in after this, because this went so big and so high with such a huge sort of villain that was hard to control or fight. And I couldn't see them going any further with this. It has a really nice conclusion to the film. It ties certain things up. There's certain aspects that don't completely tie up, and I wish I got a bit more information about, especially Ethan's past. But then after seeing that interview with Macquarie and him talking about the particular girl in that past thing and how he'd shot all of that and was going to explain it all, but it didn't really work or serve the purpose to what they wanted it to do in the film. And Macquarie said, if I was going to do that, I would make that film. So it kind of, they've taken more and more, and so it's shrunken down, but he's right, he would have had to tell a whole completely different story to what he wanted to tell in this movie, so it sort of makes sense that he chose to do it that way. But the film does tie up a lot of loose ends and brings back some interesting characters that we'd seen in the previous movie. And like I mentioned about the previous film, this is really Ethan's story. There's backstory to it. The journey he goes on is mostly by himself. Yes, his team is there and they do interact with him, and he does work with them in particular aspects in the movie, but they are split up for a long period of time. And in that time, it's really about Ethan trying to work out what needs to be done. He's seen what's going to transpire, and he has to outsmart the AI and do what he has to do. So it's really his journey. And this time, it's not just it'll cost him something, it could really cost him his life. And that's something that they really pushed more in this than they did in the previous film. Like I mentioned in the previous film about it costs him something as in the superhero aspect. So it's all personal stuff. The previous film cost the love of his life, and Final Reckoning cost him a lot more in many aspects. I'm not going to go too much into it for those who haven't seen the film yet, but there is choices made and directions they take this particular character, and it costs him even more and more as the film goes on, and I love that. It's always interesting to see a superhero action character who's up against it, and the choices they make to overcome what's presented to them, and how they need to do particular things no matter how they're seen by others, or seen by the villain, or seen by the world at large. And for the first time ever, Ethan doesn't have all the answers. He sort of works it as he goes. And if you look in previous films, you could say, well, he's done that the whole time. Yes, but he's always had some sort of plan. There's moments in this film where Benji or other team member turns to him and says, well, what's the plan? And he's like, he doesn't say anything, but it's like he doesn't really know. He's just playing it by ear. He's doing the best he can in the situation, but he doesn't really know what's going to befall the world or his team, or what he's going to ultimately have to do or sacrifice. I do like that we get a bit more of the AI in this particular movie, and that how it's starting to manipulate the media and making things that aren't true, and the rise of this particular cult and group who ultimately want to be part of it and believe in what it's actually working towards, and how they have to go old school with the particular thing that they give to Ethan about the mission. I really loved that, and how they sort of had to cut themselves off from technology. And like I mentioned previous, these two films, this and Dead Reckoning, really look at the fears that people have in regards to the AI, and how much the AI is involved in their lives and how it can control certain things. This pushes that to an extreme, of course, but it still deals with that sort of particular issues that people face and worry about in regards to AI. Ethan takes on more than he can really handle in this film. He tries to keep his friends out of danger, but ultimately they end up thrown back into the fray, and he can't really continue making the decisions he usually would make. He has to make different decisions. And like I mentioned, after his interaction with the AI itself, he knows what's coming. He knows something that no one else really knows. And they all start to doubt him. They all start to think his choices he's making are wrong, that he's going to be the thing that ends the world. And even people who trusted him before don't trust him. But he knows what's going to happen, what has to be done. No matter who turns their back on him, no matter who doubts him, he knows the direction things are going, and he knows what he has to do in order to stop what's about to transpire. What this film and the previous film do well is they bring back stuff from the past, either characters or particular objects or storylines that we'd seen previous, and how they took something like the rabbit's foot that we see in the third film and what they do with it in this story and what it actually is, which they never really knew. I don't even think the writer knew what it was going to be, but they take that and inject it into this, and it makes so much sense and it works really well. This is definitely a well thought out story. McQuarrie came up with a really great storyline and villain, and what he did with the characters and the choices he made, and the film he makes and delivers for us is quite extraordinary. It's not perfect, but it's definitely the conclusion that this series really deserves. And I know there's a lot of people who piss and moan about it and don't like it and complain about certain things. But you've got to think about how big this film was, how long it took them to get this to the ultimate screen and audiences, and how McQuarrie, I saw recently, took on board all the complaints of the previous film and tried to shape it and change it and do something different with it and address those things that the audience didn't like. He talks about how him and Tom Cruise are really about what the audience thinks. They are the audience. They're working with the audience to provide the audience and us with something that is extraordinary. These blockbusters we just don't get anymore, and delivering each time, and with the films, but also the stunts and just everything they do in regards to these movies. So he really tried to shape this next film differently to what he did with the previous movie. And there are sequences he talked about where he shot, like I mentioned, the backstory with the particular woman from his past, and how like McQuarrie sort of made a non-linear version of this story, and it didn't quite work, and it went through a few changes and iterations, and ultimately became the film that we got in the end. It just shows that he just wanted to make the best film. Him and Cruise really wanted to make the best film that they could, to deliver and to make something entertaining, a big blockbuster that audiences could enjoy again. Because like I mentioned, we don't get many of these films anymore, but when we do, and they're done right, they're fantastic to watch. The only issues I find with the movie, besides not completely explaining certain things I wanted more information about, is really what they do with the Gabriel character. When we first see him in the previous film, he's a leader of this cult, he's suave and cool and interesting, and he knows what's going to happen and he believes it completely and solely. But by the end of that film, when things don't go the way the AI told him it would, he starts to lose faith. And he starts to want to go against what the AI was doing. And I thought what they were doing with his character there was great in Dead Reckoning. But when we get to Final Reckoning, he appears at the beginning and he disappears for most of the movie. He does serve a purpose towards the end of the film, but it just feels like we've got two villains now and two separate storylines. And there's nothing wrong with that. They've done that in other Mission Impossibles and James Bond and a variety of other big blockbuster movies in the action genre. But there's just something that he feels not wasted, but he doesn't feel like he serves much of a purpose anymore. And I guess, in a way, me just thinking now, I suppose if you look at it, he had a purpose and believed in what he was doing, but now that's been taken away from him. Doubt has filled his mind. So he has no other option but to go against the thing that he wanted, that he felt was what he believed in, that let him down. And him being not in the whole film, okay, I get that, and we see why at the end. But his character comes off, especially in the biplace sequence and towards the end of the film, as a bit of a silly, goofy character the things he says, the things he does. He just feels like a cartoon villain in some ways. And I think that's just one little thing that does let the film down a little bit. And as my friend mentioned, we should have got more AI. I think we got enough, but it would have been kind of interesting to see a little bit more of how it sort of worked. And we only get to see that when Ethan, interacts with it and how he interacts with it. But there's so much more that we wish we could see. And thinking of that, when he does interact with the AI, we know something the rest of the group doesn't. We see what he sees in this vision. We see how things are going to unfold. And we know and believe in what he believes. And we know he's going to, we strongly hope and believe he's going to accomplish the goals he sets out to accomplish. And everyone doubts him, but he has to be that thing that they doubt because he knows what needs to be done. It's very Batman-esque in a way, but I love that. I really love what they do with that AI aspect. But yeah, Gabriel's sort of a disappointment in some ways in what they do with his character in this particular film. Like I talked about, I think originally this film was going to be open up with the submarine, and we were just going to go straight to the submarine, and we're going to continue on the story that they set up in the previous. But because of things not going the way they planned, the shoot being longer than they expected, and also audiences not embracing this film as much as they had previous, especially with something they'd only done recently, which was Top Gun Maverick, it sort of caused them to go, okay, so what do we need to do? What story are we telling now? And how can we take what's happened in the previous film and shape it and shift it into something else? And Final Reckoning's exactly what they did with that. I really love so many aspects of this movie. I really love so many aspects of both films. I think they're really great and really wonderful action movies. It's cool to see Cruise bringing back these blockbusters in a great way because they cost a lot of money and then you have to make more money, but they do really well. And just the marketing that Cruise did, traveling around the world, going to Cannes, going to other film festivals and bits and pieces and really sort of showing the love he has for cinema and showing the world this film that he created with his good friend and great collaborator, Christopher McQuarrie. It just showed Cruise in a different light, and I really loved that. And I think he's such a driving force for film, and he loves cinema so much. But what's really interesting too, if we look at Tom Cruise as well, the varied career he's had, where he's did a lot of sort of dramatic sort of roles earlier in his career, and then sort of slowly shifted into this sort of action realm. And he's done it great and well, and he has the stunt work he does is extraordinary. Flying the planes, the extreme stunts that they do, particularly undertake in this movie, and the way he pushes his body above and beyond, especially for a man in his 60s. He does wonderful at that. And I don't want to take anything away from what he's crafted here. But I think now with Mission being done, he has a great opportunity to shift into something different again. Not necessarily returning back to the more dramatic roles that he's previously taken, but just sort of shifting his career a little bit. Get back to less of the big action set pieces and more of the solid acting that we know he can do. And he's great as Ethan, and he has some more emotional and layered, real emotional aspects to his character and layered parts of his character. I just want to see what he does ultimately next. And the same from Christopher McQuarrie. Like, these movies have been his life for so many years now. Like, what's he going to do next? And there is talk, they reckon the next one is Broadsword, that McQuarrie sort of wrote and wanted to make ages ago. And now he's got Cruise involved in it. I mean, like I mentioned, he doesn't say much in it because of the silent aspect. So that's something to look forward to. And I really look forward and enjoy seeing what this collaborative team are going to do next. In the end, both Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning are great stories. They conclude. Final Reckoning is a great concluding chapter to the franchise. I really love so many aspects of this movie and what they were able to do and accomplish, and the questions they were able to ask, and the film that McQuarrie and Cruise were able to make. It's just a real testament to them as a collaborative team, and it's a real testament to how they're both willing to push what is capable in cinema. I'm a big fan. As I mentioned, not perfect, but a really great conclusion in my opinion. And these two films go hand in hand together. So that's it. That's my review of both those films. Put in the comments below what you think, whether you agree, disagree with the things I've said, and which part you like better, and if you think that this Final Reckoning is a good conclusion to the particular franchise. I'd love to hear from you. Anyway, that's it. That's all from me today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please subscribe down the bottom. Follow me on Letterboxd and Facebook. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.